and gentlemen, please keep standing for the Chair and Vice Chair of Council.
Please sit down. Good evening. How nice to see so many people in the public sector. We start off in the usual way. Apologies for absence. Yes.
Councillor Bill Croy.
Thank you. Yes.
Councillor Sharon Johnson.
Thank you.
And Councillor Strachan Hook, who can do.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? None at all. Minutes. Has everybody read them? Do they wish that I should sign them in a true and proper record?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I believe I was at that. I'm not listening to the president.
Which meeting?
The council meeting on 28th July.
Oh. Yes, thank you. Right, thank you. Communications from the Chair. The next item. I'd just like to inform members that the civic dinner made a profit in the region of £800, almost 300 of that coming from raffle. People were extremely generous. I have attended 16 events since the last council. They ranged in variety from lunch at streets to homes to shaking hands with the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge when they paid a visit to the school. Just two of them are worthy of slightly greater mention. Heart for Harlow Awards dinner. The town was awarded a trophy for improvements to the town park, Pets Corner and so on, and I congratulate portfolio holder Tony Durkin on that. Then we had the Sports Awards. Casey Stoney, CBE, was kind enough to come along and actually hand out the prizes. She's a lady footballer for anybody who, like me, is ignorant of sports. And it was a very good evening, very well organised, fantastic to see how many successful and brilliant sportspersons we do have in the town. I congratulate Chris Purvis, who did most of the organising for that. Finally, I would like to remind members that Remembrance Day commemoration on Friday the 11th at 11 o'clock, of course, we will be raising the flag outside the Civic here, and it will be nice to see a good attendance from members. Then on the 13th, that being the nearest Sunday, there will be a service at Netswall Cross, which again I do hope will be well attended. Thank you. No petitions from the public.
Under the new Housing and Planning Act, what measures will Harlow Council take to implement secure lifetime tenancies, and particularly those living in or having to move into supported or ward-assisted council homes? And read the second one, yeah?
Thank you. Would you like to continue with your second question?
Okay. With reference to the Housing and Planning Act 2016, will Harlow Council buy back any of the 350 high-value vacant homes that are to be sold on the open market?
Thank you. Would you like to step down and we will take all 7 questions as I've said. Miss J. Spaskowski. Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
Yes, Janet Schwakowski. Does the council agree that the new Housing Act is an attack on social and council housing that will increase housing insecurity, divide communities and lead to greater levels of inequality? If they do, can you please detail the steps that Harlow Council is taking against implementation of the Act and to lessen the impact of the Act?
And your second question?
My second question is, can the council assure tenants that if they're forced to move and to downsize, they will be as near to their workplace, public transport, doctors and dentists, surgeries, etc., and that they will not be outside of Harlow boundaries?
Thank you. Would you like to wait? We will have one answer. Mr. P. Topley.
Okay, do you want my first question?
Yes, please. Would you like to read it out?
Regarding the Housing and Planning Act, can Harlow Council assure Harlow residents that planning bids from within Harlow or outside to make any of our housing estates brownfield sites for demolition will be opposed? Okay, do you want my second
Thank
one?
you. Would you like to step aside and...
Oh,
sorry, you have a second question.
Yeah. Regarding the Housing and Planning Act, can Harlow Council estimate how many pay-to-stay residents are likely to fall into rent arrears and describe what measures are being taken to minimise the impact on tenants?
Thank you. Mr. T. Topley.
Good evening, I am Tom Topley and I was speaking on behalf of the Harlow Renters Action Association. Government plans to cap housing benefit for social rented properties from April will put an estimated 82,000 specialist homes under threat of closure. Can Harlow Council state how many sheltered home tenants this will affect in Harlow? Also, what is the possibility of sheltered housing closing as a direct effect of this legislation in Harlow? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson, would you like to reply?
So, Tom, can you turn off the microphone, please? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. In response, first of all, can I thank all the questioners for these really relevant and topical questions here tonight. My response to the 7 questions that have been raised. The controversial Planning and Housing Act 2016 will introduce significant changes to the provision and management of affordable housing in England that will change social housing in England unrecognisably. In particular, the changes to planning legislation, the central setting of rent levels, the sale of high value voids or financial equivalent, as well as the redefinition of secure tenancies will have expected implications for reduced resources, local housing priorities and impose additional pressures on Harlow Council tenants' financial position, including tackling of the acute housing need at Harlow. A provision in the Act is for the redefinition of secure tenancies, which will impact on council lettings, as well as associated housing management policies that are relevant to their operations. The Act redefines a secure tenancy and ends the use of lifetime tenancies for most new council tenancies. In the future, councils must offer fixed-term tenancies with a 2 to 10 year term when the tenancy is granted unless exempted. Provisions in the new Act include councils having the duty to consider selling their higher value housing when it falls vacant. Whilst it appears that there is no specific requirement to sell, it is expected that there will be an annual levy on stock-owning councils based on the market value of higher value council homes that are assumed to have fallen vacant in that year. Councils must pay this money to central government each year, primarily to fund the right to buy for housing association tenants. The council's housing allocation scheme currently operates a system of bidding in which applicants are encouraged to actively search for property in Harlow. Applicants are offered choice when they make an application of where they wish to reside in Harlow. The council can offer no guarantee that it will be able to meet every such expression of preference due to the acute pressure on social housing. However, existing council tenants will not be based outside of Harlow area. Initial analysis suggests that 40% of current council tenants may be affected by the changing of increased rent for those properties considered by the government of high value. But it appears that those currently in receipt of housing benefit may be excluded. The extra rent being charged to approximately 40% of tenants goes to central government and not Harlow Council. The Department of Work and Pension have announced that as from 7th of November 2016, the benefit cap will be increased further from £500 to £385 per week for families and couples, and from £350 to £258 per week for single claimants. This has a potential to impact on over 100 council tenants. The council will continue to support those affected with budget advice and support to assist their transition to a lower income. In addition, the council will continue to work with tenants who fall into arrears under our can't pay, won't pay ethos to ensure appropriate support and assistance is provided. Implementation to apply the powers or exemptions contained in the Act would need to begin when the government had prepared secondary legislation and detailed guidance, including pay to stay, which is yet to be received. The Council has begun to anticipate the impact, implications and opportunities that arise from this new legislation by assessing the potential financial impact on housing revenue account business plan. By starting to review the relevant strategies, policies together with their operations and by raising the awareness of the expected changes. The Council will continue to work towards making more housing available in Harlow with a wider range choice of housing types which are generally affordable, helping to improve the choices for those in housing need, as well as improving the health and well-being by improving housing conditions. However, in terms of brownfield sites, the Council would resist any such moves in principle, but ultimately any future decision would depend on the specific circumstances pertaining at the time.
Thank you. Supplementary questions. Mick Patrick, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you. Mark, you just said about mixed tenures and housing types. Reference to the strategic market area housing need that was on the July full council meeting. The projection to build 51,000 homes in the Epping and Huddersfield, Hertford and Harlow area by 2033. Can Harlow Council commit to build 50% of council housing on any development of housing on public land, as stated in the National Defend Council Housing Manifesto?
In response, I'm sure the Council within its local plan is working towards all these issues, and I would hope that yes they would.
Did you have a second question, Mick?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Ms. Gutowski, would you have... Thank you.
I was pleased to hear the Councillor Wilkinson seemed to give recognition of the seriousness of this Act and the serious consequences for council tenants. However, in your response, you very much were saying the council must do this, the council must do that. And I'm concerned to know what resistance the council might offer to the implementation of the Act. A number of Labour councils, including Hackney and Islington, have taken a strong stand against the Act. Indeed, Islington Council has given the commitment to continue to give security of tenure to residents. Will Harlow Labour Council also make this pledge and link up with other councils to organise a national campaign against this Act, which Labour policy itself describes as an act of social cleansing?
Thank you very much. In response, I do certainly concur with the questionnaire that this is an appalling act that will have a massive effect on not only Harlow Council but all councils up and down the country. As far as the question is concerned, yes, I am aware that there is obviously going to be a lot of resistance, and this administration has a very similar view that we will certainly have an appalling stance on this. However, I can't commit to break it. Once it becomes legislation, I can't commit to breaking any law that comes in, and I'm sure whatever Harlow Council can do to try to alleviate the situations of council tenants in this town, we will certainly do.
Did you have a second supplementary question? Thank you. Full top, please.
The pay-to-stay policy, it's designed to push people out of council housing and either taking up that right to buy, but obviously it was going to force many people to move house or drive people into poverty. So many tenants are saying they can't pay it and they're going to resist any attempt to evict them. So any council that does implement this pay-to-stay is going to turn voters away from it and it's going to pay a price. So will the council commit to not implementing this policy, this pay-to-stay means test, and to not evicting tenants? It's a policy of resistance rather than a policy of compliance that will get huge support from local people if that's the stance that the council does take.
As my previous response to the last question, obviously again I stand to give my disapproval of this act altogether and the significant effects it have on council tenants. But this council, most councils, cannot pledge to break legislation, no matter how poor we think this legislation is, and it is extremely poor legislation. I cannot commit to this council breaking with legislation.
Tom Topley.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just go back up? The question I asked about the closure of assisted premises, sheltered housing, you didn't answer that at all. I thought threat to closure.
As I said, at the moment there's very little detail around about who exactly is going to be affected by these changes. Many people in sheltered housing receive some type of benefit. People on benefit are exempt from this legislation, we believe at the moment. But I did state in my initial response that we are, particularly on the pay to stay, which is yet to be received, we are still awaiting a lot more guidance from the government, and I can assure the questionnaire that we are asking these questions about who is going to be exempted and who's not, and we are still awaiting guidance from the government at the moment. Until we get that guidance, I'm not in a position to give exact details of who will be exempted and who won't.
Right, thank you. Can I, my supplementary question is the same theme. Over the recent years, I've been to meetings in places like this where we discuss housing as a problem, and I put forward more than one occasion that we could do any expansion within the town. We could do a water-assisted accommodation in this town, preferably built by the council. Have you got any plans for the future that we can be looking at or get some interest around? Because this is one of the things that old people are interested in. We've lost some within the town over the years, but also that the ones that were done. Well, I've been in the town over 50 years, and we've lost some, and there's not been no replacement. And these were all built really by young people at the time, looking forward to giving a better deal for older people. Now the town has become more older than younger people now. So what is the future for older people within the town? Thank you.
Switch the mic on, please. Thank you. Robert Halpern, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly share the view of the need for sheltered housing and supported housing in the town. Obviously, as we age and get older, there's obviously going to be more need for it. And I certainly, we are trying, as I said we are trying to widen the choice of housing types in Harlow and improve choices for those in housing need as well. So certainly we're looking at all types of rehousing, and I'm sure as we move forward with things like the local plan, I'm sure there definitely will be issues that we will address. Thank you.
Robert Harper.
What is the council doing to help struggling businesses in Stowe and regeneration of the area?
You going to answer?
So in July 2016, the Stowe Neighbourhood Design Framework Supplementary Planning Document for the Stowe was adopted. This was prepared in order to help guide future developments and improvements to the Stowe and provide a design framework to promote and guide development opportunities to regenerate the Stowe and to address the needs of local residents and other stakeholders by improving the vitality and viability of the area. The supplementary planning document was prepared following input from local residents, businesses and community groups who participated in the consultation process. The document puts forward a number of potential interventions, such as opening up the through road. Council officers will investigate this further over the coming months and pursue with Essex County Council if it's appropriate to do so. Other measures have or will be put in place in the coming months in order to help businesses who are struggling. This includes, during September, representatives of the Council have consulted with retailers at the Stowe to better understand the issues that they are facing. There is an ongoing dialogue with retailers as the Council develops improvement plans and initiatives. A project is underway to work with retailers to look at options for environmental improvements in the Stowe. The Council's Strategy and Economic Development Manager is able to direct retailers towards business support, information and advice. All Stowe retailers are about to be contacted in writing in order to promote this service. Council representatives are making arrangements for a meeting with the retailers with a view, if the will exists, they will set up their own business forum. The Council's Community Safety Team and Essex Police have developed and are working through an action plan for the Stowe, and the potential for opening up access and therefore increasing footfall between Aldi and the wider Stowe area will be investigated. The Council is committed to doing all it can within the resources available to improve the Stowe for residents, businesses and the community as a whole.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
I do. I thank the Council for their response and the work that they are doing. I'm here this evening with many businesses from Stowe who have signed a petition. Almost every business in the Stowe signed a petition, and since the terrible tragedy that took place, there is a serious problem of a potential spiral of decline in the Stowe, and there is an urgent need from all the businesses for a number of measures to be taken, partly because people are not going to the Stowe, and there has been an increase in antisocial behaviour since the tragedy, with one shopkeeper being threatened with being stabbed. I asked the Council to consider this urgently, along with the work that they're already doing. First, working with the police and other community groups like the Street Pastors for an increase of police presence and working CCTV, improvement of signage all around the Stowe, short-term financial support, cutting rents in the buildings that they own, at least temporarily, to help the businesses, many of whom can't even afford to pay their monthly bills at the moment because of the loss of shoppers in the area. The urgent reinstatement of the road through the shopping area, again signed by virtually every shopkeeper, and it's easy to do given because the road is still underneath the pavement, and looking at the extension of the free parking beyond the hour. And I would ask the Council to seriously consider urgently implementing these things and also accept the petition from the residents and businesses of the Stowe. I cannot stress how urgent this action is needed. Thank you.
Stand up, please. Respect the audience and play your name.
I'm sure they don't see my face, and I can hear you quite clearly through the microphone. I absolutely understand the issues that you raise. There have been extensive consultations with businesses, and there's a further meeting taking place on the 24th of this month with traders and residents meetings will be set up. A number of the things that you mentioned have already been put in place as part of the action plan, including the Street Pastors, There will be a consultation on implementing a public space protection order, banning sort of drinking and cycling through the area. In terms of the reinstatement of the road, as I mentioned in my sort of formal response, council officers will investigate further over the coming months. I have to say that initial consultation with Essex County Council put an estimate of between £1 and £2 million on reinstating that road. So there has to be questions about how that's to be funded and by whom, and the benefits that would bring. I know it's been cited in the study that was done around increasing footfall, but that has to be balanced against the cost. But we are taking it very seriously. There is an active action plan that is working with the council, the police and other stakeholders to do a range of short-term and medium-term improvements. And we'll continue to do that, and we'll absolutely take into consideration the views and wishes of local businesses.
Thank you. Motions from questions from councillors, there are none. So we move to motions from councillors. Councillor Wade Foreman.
Thank you, Chair. The Housing and Planning Act, which received royal assent on 12th of May this year, contains a wide range of measures to supposedly expand home ownership, reform housing management and the planning process, and increase housing supply to tackle the housing crisis. However, the Act's main focus is on boosting home ownership at the expense of affordable and social housing, which the majority of people on average incomes need. As a consequence, there will be even fewer social and affordable homes. The housing crisis will worsen and it will become more difficult for people on average incomes to find an affordable home to rent or buy. The Housing and Planning Act contains measures requiring councils to consider the sale of vacant higher value council homes and to remit the income generated from sales to the Treasury to fund the extension of the right to buy to housing association tenants, which will be offered by housing associations on a voluntary basis. While the Act makes provision for grants to be paid to housing associations to compensate them for homes sold under the voluntary right to buy, there is no commitment, however, in the legislation that guarantees funding for the replacement of council homes. This raises questions as to how the replacement will be funded, how long it will take for homes to be replaced, and the type of housing and tenure of replacement homes, as these could be homes for sale, such as starter homes, rather than homes for social rent. This council believes that the policy will lead to a further depletion of social rented homes and will have a negative impact on the workforce and housing supply. With a reduced stock and reduced rental income, jobs and services could be put at risk and hit the vulnerable hard. The government is also introducing the pay-to-stay mandate. I just wonder how the government is going to apply this. The policy could also prove to be expensive, complex and challenging for social landlords to administer, as they will have to take an additional cost to carry out administrative work, such as market rent valuation, liaising with the MHRC to verify tenants' incomes, system changes, setting a variety of rents based on the incomes of higher earning social tenants, chasing supplemental rent and staffing costs. As it happens, MHRC will be having trouble to help due to all the government cuts. Is the government going to apply pay to stay on basic salary, or will this include overtime? As you all know, I work in the hospital. I'm also Unison Branch Secretary. I represent a lot of members in the hospital, a lot of workers. And I can tell you the majority of the staff in the hospital are actually can't afford to buy their own home. And those who are in council houses or paying private, they're having to do overtime to make ends meet. So how are they going to manage? Those who live in a council house will be affected, and I do not want my colleague homeless because they can't afford to pay the increased rent. The new Act also removes security of tenure for most council tenants. It contains clauses which requires council to issue new council tenants with fixed-term tenancies from 2 to 5 years, up to 10 years for some, including those with a disability, with potential longer tenancies for families with children until their child reaches age 19. The measures in the Act will require council to review tenancies when they are about to expire and to make decisions as to whether to renew or end tenancies or to recover possession. The policy will likely lead to the breakup of stable and mixed communities and force many people into insecure, expensive private lets. The government argues that the phasing out of lifetime council tenancies is to ensure that social housing is seen as a scarce resource that supports only those who genuinely need it. But it is also clear that those who resort to social housing need secure and stable renting to help them invest in their local communities and plan for their future. Oops.
You need to move the motion.
Yeah.
And finish, yes.
Yeah. What I would ask this council is to please support this motion, because this is a cruel act. The government hasn't thought about it before they actually implement such thing. The Secretary of Harlow Trades Council actually said that it seems like the government wrote the act on a fag packet at the back of the fag packet. I'm sure he's right, because they just decided to do it and now they don't know how to implement it. So it's very, very important to support this. Thank you. I move.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson,
I formally second the motion and reserve my right to speak later in the debate, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have to say I detect the strongest feeling of cynicism and opportunism in this long meandering motion, attempting to show Labour support for its tenants. Had they kept the motion to just the final paragraph, then there may have been a chance of support from this side. If the party opposite were really concerned about the interest of current tenants, they'd realise that the vast majority are unaffected by the changes in the Act. But where was their concern for those in housing need during the run-up to the Act? The expression crocodile tears spring to mind in viewing Labour's concern, jumping on a bandwagon that has long since left town. Where were they 4 years ago when the original consultation on fixed-term tenancies and paid to stay took place? Where were they when the tenants opposed changes to tenancies but supported paid to stay at a higher income level? Where were they when the bill was going through the House of Commons last year? Were they flying their banners in protest in the street?
I was.
I'll come to that. Where were they this year when the bill was being taken apart by the House of Lords, urging their lordships to overturn large sections of the bill? Not a word. And here, Madam Chairman, I must pay tribute to Mick Patrick and his dogged campaign to defend council housing, speaking at tenants' meetings, in the town centre handing out leaflets, organising his own meetings to pass on the message. He and I may be looking at these issues from either end of the telescope, but you have to admire his commitment in pursuing a campaign in which he genuinely believes. So where was the support from the Labour Party? Where was the engagement in his campaign from the concerned politicians opposite? If you can plough through this 300-word motion, why use one word when 10 will do, you come across the amazing claim that by giving outline permission for residential properties on brownfield sites, they will immediately be filled by luxury properties. Is there nobody in the Labour group who has the slightest grasp of the local plan and the need for any development to make a contribution to social housing, either in cash or property? And where do you find these brownfield sites? In town centres and industrial areas. Are these really the most attractive sites for luxury homes? If Labour were that concerned in the interests of current tenants, then where is their support for the reduction in rents every year for 4 years to help those most in need? This long and puzzling motion shows muddled and confused thinking, raising question after question about Labour's understanding of the issues and their commitment. The motion is just a cynical attempt by a failing party attempting to show support from where its core vote used to be.
Madam Chairman, I'm deeply disappointed tonight by the tone of this motion. Rather than debate how this council can work to deliver more and better housing for all residents, members of the administration want to pursue a pointless exercise of attacking a measure that has already been through a formal consultation process and is now an act in law. The real debate is how to deliver more and sustainable housing development that has the support of local communities. The government has committed to build 1 million homes over the next 5 years, which is something that the previous Labour government singly failed to do. In fact, when they were in power, the number of homes that were built in a single year fell to 88,000. That's not a record you can be proud of. It is in fact actually the lowest number of houses built since the 1920s. The Housing Planning Act implements 2 key Conservative Party manifesto commitments, namely the extension of the right to buy for housing association tenants and the provision of 200,000 starter homes by 2020. The bill, as it was, and now as an act, is making good the pledges that were made directly to the country and backed overwhelmingly by Harlow residents when they returned Robert Halfon to Parliament at the general election. The truth is that Labour have no record on housing to be proud of. The reduction in social rented properties happened under the previous Labour government when stocks fell by 400,000. How can you be proud of that? Ultimately, few local authority housing association homes were built under Labour compared to the Conservatives. 16,000 have been built every year under the Conservative Party in government. One of the key parts of the Housing and Planning Act I do want to focus on is the measure to extend the right to buy. The Act will make possible, through the agreement that the housing association sector has made with the government, to extend the right to buy to all of the 1.3 million tenants who currently do not have that right to become a homeowner. This voluntary agreement is good news for local housing association tenants. Now, do not take my word on the impact of this Act and what it will do for the benefit of local tenants. Listen to what the head of the National Housing Federation said. For housing associations and the nation's housing supply, residents will get the opportunity to realise their dreams of home ownership, and housing associations will be able to replace the homes sold, boosting the nation's housing supply. Let's listen to the experts. It has also been a 30-year injustice that council tenants have had their right to buy in law, but not housing association tenants. I strongly believe that when they signed a tenancy agreement, local housing association tenants did not sign away their aspiration to become home owners. One of the key areas of interest of mine is support for prospective first-time buyers. The last 3 years, the Help to Buy scheme has helped 120,000 people with a deposit to buy a home, 80% of whom are first-time buyers. We need help in Harlow to do more for our first-time buyers, and the Act achieves this by the introduction of a requirement in planning law for councils to provide, through their planning functions, starter homes available to first-time buyers. During the next 5 years, the government want to ensure that public policy recognises, as it always should have had, that providing more affordable homes to buy is an important objective of policy if we are not to shut out the next generation from the opportunities that older generations have enjoyed in this town. Providing homes for Harlow, giving local tenants opportunity to achieve their aspirations is important, neglected by the opposition. This Housing Act empowers first-time buyers and local housing association
15
tenants.
seconds, Councillor Charles.
Housing is one of the most important responsibilities Harlow Council delivers. We should be debating a very positive vision for how to improve Harlow housing. It is clear members of the administration opposite want to obsess about the past rather than focus on the present challenges faced by our tenants.
Just before I call the next speaker, I would like to remind everyone, both sides of the chamber and the public, it is courteous to let the person who is speaking speak. A lot of members of the public have come to hear this, and if people keep on interrupting, they aren't able to hear that. Thank you. Councillor Danvers.
Thank you, Chair. Defending the indefensible by the Tories is quite interesting. At the end of the day, the government's actually putting the hand in the pocket of almost all Harlow tenants and taking the money.
Mike, there's a lot of white
sorry, yes, I accept that. I think I just outside or not. In terms of actually taking. Putting the hand in the pockets of Harlow tenants. Many tenants will actually be faced very shortly with actually paying 50% rent increases because of this particular bill. Where will that money be going? That money won't be staying in Harlow. It won't be going in the housing revenue account. It will be stolen by the government to be given in this ludicrous policy of actually paying housing associations who will equally lose stock because they will have to actually give a subsidy to their own tenants to actually buy for the first time. In Harlow, we've seen the consequences, the dreadful consequences of council house sales. From 20,000 houses in the 1980s to 10,000 houses and less today. And a waiting list of 4,000 people on our waiting list. That's the consequences of Tory policies. And the other thing, in terms of selling off council stock, is madness. We've got a waiting list, and we're now being told that we've got to sell off our council housing to the highest bidders so that they can actually double the rents. We've got in Harlow just 5 landlords owning 1,000 former council house properties. What kind of rents are they charging them? Double the council rents. People paying £900 to £1,000 a month for former council housing. We've actually seen multiple occupancies of people making a fortune out of houses that were there built for people with families. At the end of the day, defend the indefensible, and that's what you're trying to do. And what do we also do? We get saddled by the Tory government a few years ago, telling us that we could actually have a housing policy of £200 million worth of debt when we were debt-free. We are no longer actually able to actually carry out our housing policies and plans. We can no longer build council housing as we started to because of this. And now we're actually down to actually not being able to properly maintain and repair the housing that we want because we're actually being deprived of all of these funds. The government's putting its hand in the pocket, Harlow tenants, taking the money, taking it out for a policy they never thought that they would have to implement because they didn't believe that they would win the last general election. And now they're actually suffering this albatross around their neck, which will actually come home and will actually roost with them very, very badly indeed, because people will actually know who to blame about this appalling policy. You can smirk if you want to, but that will be the consequences of your Tory policies.
Yes, Councillor Johnson, Andrew Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, I'd like to ask a question under Standing Order 1114, questions without notice, to the Leader of the Council. At what point during the consultation period did the leader write to Robert Halfon and ask for your views of your parties to be taken into account under the consultation of the Housing Act?
I didn't write to Robert Halfon in particular. However, I was one of the only council leaders in the country that signed the Defend Council Housing letter to the Guardian opposing the Act, so my views were very public. I've also attended Defend Council Housing meetings, and I support the manifesto.
Is that your... you want to speak?
I made it, I saw other hands.
Yes, I know. Councillor Clark.
If we're talking about cynicism and opportunism, let's look at the ideology underlying this act. Is that all right? Sorry. The aim of this act is to destroy social housing, council and housing associations, leaving only a very small residue, less secure, more costly, and only for those people in desperate needs. It supports two influential lobby groups. First of all, the Home Builders Federation. At the moment, they're expected to make provision of affordable housing under the Section 106 agreements. Secondly, the Policy Exchange think tank, advocating the end of council housing. They're both Tory associations, and they advocate forcing local authorities to sell off properties, subsidise them in order to increase home ownership and private renting. In other words, landlords and developers, and that is who this Act is supporting in particular. It extends the right to buy to housing associations, removing it from the stock of rented accommodation, forcing sales of high-value homes with the iniquitous pay-to-stay accommodation. Even if councils are not prepared to sell them off, as we see from Mark's statement, we're expected to pay the Treasury on the assumption that a certain proportion can be sold. Long-term security is slashed, interestingly, provided originally by the Thatcher government, so it's even more right-wing than the Thatcher government, which is saying something. And also to replace affordable homes rent with starter home sale. And when we talk about, there's a lot of advocating of this particular policy here, but when you think about the starter homes being, say, 250,000, it's hardly affordable. All of this, just briefly, hits the most vulnerable. And we believe and have supported consistently, as the leader has said, the Defend Council Houses policies, and in particular, notion that housing systems should be based on meeting the needs of the community, the 3,500 on the waiting list, rather than providing for profit for the few.
Thank you, Chair. I think my views on council housing are well known, and so therefore very strongly support this motion. I'd also just like to add to the mix about how the impact of not having enough supply of social housing is having on the rest of the housing sector. And the truth is, we can argue about Labour's role, the Conservative role. Politicians of all parties have taken their eyes off the ball for the last 30 or 40 years. And so therefore we can blame the Labour government, we can blame the Conservative government. There are politicians who don't get that there's a housing crisis out there. I'm hoping that people are starting to awaken to that fact. It's a real serious problem. I was on a train going up to Manchester at the weekend and listening into the conversation behind me where somebody said, I've had to move back home because I've split up with my partner. I now have to wait until somebody dies and I get an inheritance before I have a deposit. We shouldn't be like that. We shouldn't have to wait for people to die before we can have an inheritance so you can afford a step on the housing ladder. So I think the issue really is about the fact that supply has diminished over a number of years, and what we really need is mixed communities where people who have the ability to buy and have low mortgages and people have the ability for the right to rent if that's what they wish to do as well. So the problem is we've got a dislocated housing sector, and that's been created by a number of governments. We could talk about who's built the most over a number of years. Yes, Macmillan built a number in the late 50s. The Wheatley Housing Act in 1924, the Labour administration started kicking off with 500,000 council houses. So there's been peaks and troughs, and often it's linked to the economy and how the economy is playing out. But the truth is we need to get a grip of this, and we need to make sure that we're not having people with 10% deposit trying to buy a 3-bedroom house where the mortgage is going to be between £1,500 and £1,800 a month. That's a lot of money for people to afford as they're starting out. So I totally agree with this motion. I think there's a lot of problems with the Housing Act. This does not solve the problems I've outlined, but there is a deeper crisis than just council housing. There's a crisis in all sectors of housing.
Chairman, I wasn't planning to speak tonight to this debate, but the things that I've heard have really incensed me. It would sound to anyone walking off the street tonight that the Labour Party in this town really do care about housing, and they really do care about the Housing Act. They don't, Madam Chairman. They care about scaring people. They care about appealing to their base, and they care about trying to win elections. And I'll tell you why they don't care about the Housing Act. If they did care about the Housing Act, during the statutory consultation period, they would have made representations to the government, because that's what you do if you care about an issue. You go and you speak to the relevant people. But as the leader himself confirmed earlier on, he didn't even bother to speak to our MP about making the views of the town clear. But the town made their views clear when they elected the MP and elected him on a manifesto that included these items. Now, the Labour Party has a history of doing this. They have a history in this town of complaining about things once they've been and gone. There's no point in doing that. You've already lost the argument on this. This is an act of law now. This is coming into law. You're going to have to live with it. But you know what I'm looking forward to? I'm looking forward to equality. That's something that your side of the chamber often talks about and never really delivers. But this government is delivering equality for 1.3 million tenants of housing associations who haven't had access to the right to buy for 30 years and are now going to have access to one of the most freeing and life-changing pieces of legislation. I thank God for Margaret Thatcher. I thank God for the piece of legislation that brought the right to buy into effect, because it has improved communities up and down this country, and we should be extending the right to buy as much as possible. That's real equality.
How many people on the streets since you took over?
Madam Chairman, can...
Yes, please don't interrupt.
Thank you. Labour have, as we've heard tonight, Labour have no clear record on housing. Councillor Charles quoted, fewer council houses built or local authority homes built a year under Labour compared to 16,000 homes every year under the Conservatives. I don't enjoy being lectured at when we're in the right. I don't enjoy being lectured at when you fail to deliver. And I don't enjoy being lectured at when the horse has already bolted. Move on.
What I would like to know, if that was the case, why is it that they're allowing outside landlords to come into Harlow and buy former council properties, not houses but properties? And what I'm getting to is that if your concern is the Harlow people, then why don't you ask the Harlow people and not people from outside Harlow that are being brought in? Thank you very much.
Sorry, I'll just come back to Dan on that. Dan, with no say over a private landlord buying a private property we do not own. I don't know if you understand the private market, but we don't. Of course, we can't council houses, unfortunately, when they're bought under right to buy, when they're sold on by the tenants, we have zero say about that. There is nothing we can do about that in this private market. But actually, I wasn't planning on speaking, and I'm not feeling 100%, so please bear with me. I might not be at my best tonight. But I felt it said to say thank you for intervening when people were talking, Chair. I would have appreciated if that happened while my fantastic colleague was moving the motion. I found it extremely disrespectful that members of the other side were actually having conversations while she was moving it and absolutely not listening. I found that extremely unacceptable, and that is never okay. Maybe when female politicians speak and interrupted, maybe that could be corrected, please. I'm really proud to have been in this administration, and actually since I've been in this administration and got into the council in 2012, we've had two fantastic portfolio holders that have dealt with housing. And under Councillor Truan, who consistently spoke up
for council housing, for the rights of tenants, for building more council houses and more social housing. And has been openly critical of previous Labour governments that did not do enough. I think many on this side have been, and that we need to do more now. And now under Councillor Williamson, who has picked up that torch and carried on the fight. We've built council houses in Harlow. We want to do more. Unfortunately, the acts that the government keep bringing in make it very difficult for us to do. And actually, when the opposite side says about how developments can have social housing and have tenancies, it's ironic given your government or in planning legislations that we took away that minimum 30% if developers can prove it's not viable and affordable. And that is why we've had Circle A recently gain on their appeal a place that has unacceptable levels of social and affordable housing. We did respond to the government consultations. We've been constantly outspoken, and our portfolio holders have on that. Since we came into administration, one of the first things we did was reorder our corporate plan and put housing right there at the top of one of the main issues that we need to address in this town. And I want to speak about my colleague, actually, Councillor Foreman, so thank you for making this motion tonight. She's consistently lobbied about this issue. She's constantly been outspoken, out in the public, out in the press, to this group, to this council, and to say that she and this side hasn't, she's been shouting very loud, maybe you just haven't been listening.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, like yourself, I welcome the fact that we have a number of people in our public gallery tonight. And I particularly welcome those of them that have actually stayed to listen to this debate. I'd also like to note that we have a number of people in the gallery that, and this is an educated guess, are not only under 40, but possibly are even under 30. And I think that's really appropriate because this motion here tonight is about your future and your children's future. Chair, I rise to support this motion insofar as it seeks to stem the tides of attacks on those who would simply see a roof over their heads and their families' heads now and in the future. But in the fullness of time, I believe we need to go further and we need to be bolder. We need to start preparing to stand up and support those calling for the abolition of the right to rent, of the right to buy. We need support to support those calling for the right to rent and plough our energies into supporting those voices. At a time when those in the upper echelons of power who, having had their 5 minutes of fame, have left the chamber, are intent on seeing that certainly where housing is concerned, our residents have no rights at all. Thank you, Chair.
I don't see anybody. Councillor Wilkinson, do you wish to express your right?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I won't go on for too long because many colleagues have obviously said a lot about this motion tonight, a really important issue. And I think where I started my statement very early today, this, no doubt about it, this legislation will change social housing unrecognisably, not only up and down this country but in Harlow. But I thought by seconding this motion, what I would do is, many people have spoken about the national politics of this. I actually think we should talk about the Harlow politics on this, how it affects Harlow people, Harlow council tenants, and Harlow council. So let's have a look at some of the facts and figures. Councillor Carter said, where were we when all these 4-year fixed-term tenancies was being consulted on? I remember Councillor True, my predecessor, time and time again in this very chamber, raising concerns about the government's changes to fixed-term tenancies supported by this group. Maybe Councillor Tull's right, maybe the people don't listen when people are raising concerns. And like Councillor Tull mentioned, I was proud, very proud, to be part of a Labour administration that built the first council house in Harlow for 30 years for Harlow residents, something we should all be very, very proud of. Councillor Carter also said that this doesn't affect the vast majority of people in Harlow. Well, let's look at some of the analysis and some of the numbers. Analysis is showing us that 40% of council tenants in this town will be badly affected by the pay to stay legislation. That is 40%, and we've got thousands of council tenants in this town. 40% of many of these with young children and have got families will have to pay now considerably more rent. How can that be good for this town? It's an absolute disaster for this town. We believe that the change in fixed term tenancies from secure tenancies is going to affect about 150 people a year in Harlow. That's an absolute disgrace. I also said in my questions earlier that 100 people will be worse off from the benefit caps on housing. Those 100 people may not be a massive amount in significance of numbers of population in Harlow, but are probably 100 most vulnerable people in this town on benefits. And here we are with the government's new ruling taking money away from some of the most vulnerable people in this town. That's another disgrace. Okay? Let's have a look at just these fixed term tenancies and how that affects our stock in Harlow. Okay, we have a downsizing policy in Harlow, with particularly some elderly people that come along that are now in a big house but brought their families up, don't want a big house no more, they want to downsize to a smaller property, and there's an initiative for them to do that we are trying to support. But what's going to happen now? Are people going to downsize a big property to a smaller property, and the first thing we're going to say to them, we can't offer you a secure tenancy, you're going to have to go on a fixed term. What's going to happen is that will badly affect the amount of downsizing properties that we receive. That in turn affects the amount of council stock that we as a council need to offer to many, many overcrowded families in this town that want to move to a bigger premises. Is now going to be less up for grabs for those people. Another disgrace. And as Councillor Dowers has mentioned, this extra money that's going to be paid by these people that can ill afford it, this extra money on rent, this extra money that's going to come from benefit caps, this extra money because we've got to sell off our higher value stock when it becomes available, pay a levy on it. Where's it going to go? Is it going to go into this town? Is it going to go into Harlow? No, it's going to go to central government so they can pay the coffers to do whatever they want with it, and that is absolutely not right. Let's look at Harlow Council finances. The government's housing policies over the last few years will have a dramatic effect on the amount of money we receive to spend on council housing. A really substantial amount of money is going to be lost. That affects things like capital programme. We're forever hearing councillors raising stories about when the windows are going to get done in my ward and certain streets. We are now going to have to cut a lot of programmes because this government has decided to cut the amount of money that we can spend in Harlow on housing. Councillor Foreman and his excellent motions said right near the end that no one has really thought about it, and actually it's quite a true statement. Council officers on our behalf are attending seminar after seminar with civil servants that are trying to tell us how this new legislation is going to be implemented, and we're still waiting for some serious answers to the questions.
15 seconds.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We're still awaiting for serious answers to our serious questions, and I, for one, I have grave reservations not only about the national scene, but how this is going to affect many, many people in Harlow, and I fully support the motion, Chair.
Councillor Foreman, do you wish to sum up?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Carter actually said nobody cared about this act, so did Councillor Andrew Johnson. Where were we when this bill was going through before it became an act? I was in Parliament. I've been walking the street with thousands of people lobbying the government. Weekends, weekdays, it doesn't matter. I've been there. And Councillor Johnson, Andrew Johnson, talk about caring. Last time when I was in here, remember, he said he didn't care about me, but I hope you care about those people and agree with this motion, because it's going to affect a lot of Harlow people. We've got young people in this audience, and these young people, what I want is for them to have a future, have a home, have security. We do not want people to be homeless or live with their mum and dad until they are 40. They need a future, and that's what is happening. You go in that hospital and see people, young nurses, even they're nurses, you think they earn a lot, we don't. They can't even afford a mortgage. And now we're trying to put all these in to stop people having a home, having security. This is a disgrace. We need to fight it. I've always done it. and I need all of you behind us to make sure the government need to understand. I know it's an act to say we need to live with it. They still doing the regulation. So we can still lobby them and get them to make things better for these young people and for everybody, for elderly people, for everybody. Everybody deserves a home. A home is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And that's what we need. Not having a home. I've met a lot of homeless. In the jobs fair, Robert Halfon invited Harlow Trades Council in jobs fair. I was there. And I met a lot of people with no jobs. I've met 2 people who came looking for a job but they were homeless. The reason they lost their job was because they lost their home. Without a home, you cannot have anything. So this is very, very important. We really need to tell the government to think again. Margaret Thatcher started it and now this government's finishing it. And we cannot have it. We've got to fight. Whether the old Labour Party, the old government, Tory government never built houses, 16,000 houses, or this council houses, I wonder how many. What we need is council houses for people who can't afford to buy. Houses in this town are very expensive to buy. Nobody, no mortgage company will give you a mortgage unless you've got 3/4 of that deposit. Who will have it? Even if I go now and buy a house with my wage, I won't even be touched. And that's how bad it's got. So we really need to tell the government, think about the regulation. The act is done, but we need to look at and apply it better. We cannot afford to actually lose all these homes, get people to pay more, and so on. A lot of people are managing on 2-3 jobs, and now we're asking them to pay more. They're doing 2-3 jobs because they need food, because they've got to pay their rent. And a lot of people, what the government should have done is put a rent cap on the private rent.
Absolutely.
They never thought of that. They never thought of that. That's what we need to do. Let's not fight each other. Let's fight for the people in Harlow. They are the one we got elected to look after them, not to fight each other. Thank you, Chair.
Right, we move to the vote. All those in favour of the motion? And those against?
UKIP friend of the Tories.
Yeah.
Any abstentions? The motion is carried. I remind people again, it is very, very discourteous to interrupt, talk among yourselves. Even that is very disruptive. People at the back want to hear the speaker, not whatever you're talking about. Right, we move on then to the next motion, Neighbourhood Planning Bill proposed by John Clempnell. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Look, at the heart of this motion are issues of local democracy, and in particular, local democracy as it applies to the most important decisions this council is going to make, that will literally shape Harlow for many years to come. There have been some heated debates in this chamber, one very recently, about the local plan, and I'm sure there'll be further debates about the shape of that local plan in the coming months as we get to public consultation in the early part of next year, and then adopting our local plan. But this last-minute amendment to the Neighbourhood Planning Bill effectively allows the Secretary of State to take control away from local people, to give Essex County Council the ability to impose a local plan and then get Harlow Council to pay for that imposition as well. I'm not going to say very much more than this, but this is absolutely at the core of local democracy. Yes, there will be heated debates about the actual form and shape of the local plan, but it has to be about locally, democratically elected councillors and the public of Harlow through appropriate consultations and reaching a decision on what is right for Harlow, and not that being imposed by some higher tier, in the words of the amendment, some apparently superior tier of local government, imposing it on the will of local people. I so move.
Seconder.
Seconded.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak?
I may do, yeah.
At the end or now?
Yeah, at the end, yeah.
Thank you. Move to the debate then. And through John item.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A little concerned to see this amendment on the motion on the paper tonight, Madam Chairman. The council seems to be, or the administration seems to be very worried about one of the many number of amendments that have been tabled before the committee cycle of the bill in the House. It is, as I say, one of a number of amendments, one that may not make it through to the final bill, but they seem particularly worried about it, and that struck me as strange. Why would they be particularly worried about the county council being involved? Why would they worry about working with it? I mean, we know Essex County Council has a really good history of working with Harlow District Council, as much as Councillor Danvers doesn't like to work the other way. But this is a strange one, Madam Chairman. And then it struck me in rereading the motion that this was not a matter of the Essex County Council per se, but it was that the amendment would give the ability for, in occasions where districts are not making timely progress with the production of a local plan. And I think that's the issue here, Madam Chairman. We've already seen at the last full council meeting that the Labour Party themselves can't agree where housing should go around Harlow. Fortunately, a number of them were sensible enough to agree with us and throw out housing to the south and west. Unfortunately, a number of them still want to place housing at the back of Old Harlow, which is something I thoroughly object to, and a number of members of the public still object to. So, not only can they agree within themselves where the growth should be, something that the leader of the council appears to have already agreed with other district councils around and now having to take a step back from. But I hear whilst I've been away this week, the local plan working group was cancelled yet again due to lack of the production of the relevant papers. So I wonder, Madam Chairman, is this motion merely just a case of the council getting their excuses in early for when they fail to deliver a local plan and then Essex has to sweep in and save the day? That's what it sounds like to me. This is a nonsense motion, Madam Chairman, and my group will be abstaining on this.
Anybody else wishing to speak?
Yes, Chair. Well, coming back to the actual motion and the way it was moved, of course, what this is really about is the fact that we're not disputing the fact that if local district councils fail to produce a local plan, that there shouldn't be some backup means of ensuring that every district has a local plan. This is about this particular amendment, which suddenly arrived and gives that authority to Essex County Council, or in our case Essex County Council, but obviously it's a general amendment that applies to the rest of the country. So anywhere a district council, if it was unable to in a timely way produce their local plan, they could be faced with their own county council being asked to step in and take over. Whether the county councils would want to do that, we don't know. Certainly the motion asks for us to enlist the support of the leader of Essex County Council, where presumably they would make it clear that they're not interested in carrying out this function. But the motion quite clearly says that, yes, if the districts fail to, in a timely fashion, to produce a local plan, there should be a backup, and it specifically proposes that that should be a power given to the Secretary of State, and that they should, if you like, bring about a local plan by asking another district council at the same level to take over and complete the local plan. So it's quite clear this isn't about our local plans specifically, it's about the principle of introducing an amendment at the last minute which would allow county councils, in our case Essex County Council, to start determining how this town's going to develop over the next period.
Point of order, Madam Chairman. 12.3. Scope. A motion must be relevant to the district council. The portfolio holder has just said this is nothing to do with Harlow's local plan, it's to do with a government bill. Therefore, I ask that you throw this out on the routine rationale of it not being within the scope of this council's debate.
Without wishing to enter the debate, clearly this affects every local planning authority in the country because it relates to every local planning authority in the country.
Move on then. Does anyone else wish to speak? In that case, we move to the vote. Sorry, John.
process. I have made the Harlow Council's position very clear over more than a year what Harlow Council's existing position was based on the motion that was debated some time ago. And I just want to emphasise that this is about local democracy. There's no indication that we will fail to reach a plan in a timely manner. Clearly there will be a lot of heated debate, and it's not about whether we agree. We had an open debate, there was no whip on the vote, about the council collectively needing to decide its local plan. And I'm absolutely clear that that will be a collective decision of this council, which not everyone will agree with, absolutely, on a majority vote. But it is absolutely, as Councillor Curtin said, about the principle of Secretary of State imposing the County Council, who I have very good working relationships with and have achieved some significant concessions from them in relation to a positive impact in Harlow. But it is about the principle that, to allow the Secretary of State to impose the County Council as the planning authority to impose a local plan and then to charge Harlow Council in order to implement that is absolutely not on. And it was introduced very late in the bill process. Councillor Johnson spent the vast debate about having a debate about after the horse is bolted. This is absolutely about getting the contribution of Harlow Council before this bill is finalised. Thank you, Chair.
Right, then we move to the vote. All those in favour? And against?
Oh dear.
Yes? Carried, yes. We move then to the next item, references from cabinets and committees. I believe Councillor Lambert, yours.
So moved, Chair.
Seconded?
I'll second.
Everybody in favour? Oh, anybody?
Noted.
Does anybody wish to speak? I think we did on this one. Go to the vote then. So those in favour of accepting the
Noted.
Noted. Noted.
Is this being agreed?
Okay. Yeah, no, everybody agreed then.
Agreed.
Sorry about that. Right. Reports from officers, there don't seem to be any. Minutes of cabinet and committee meetings. This is just the noting.
Noted.